come here to chew bubble gum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubble.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct from the SHR Media studio, the sumptuous and palatial SHR Media studio, with a new addition. And it's not barbecued chicken, although that sounds really good right now. It's this here thingy. This is a new old Electro Voice RE20 microphone with suspension system, which I got for a ridiculously cheap price from someone who knew someone who knew someone else who knew someone with one of these to sell. This is basically the same microphone that is used in EIB, and I thought, with such a great price like this, I wonder how it compares to the old Shure SM7B. So I'm test bedding this thing out tonight to try to find out if it provides better voice quality, whether I have to jack the volume up like crazy the way I do with the Shure. So it's kind of an experiment, an audio experiment, and if I don't like it, I'll go back to the Shure. In any event, you got a belly up to the bar, we've kept your seat, it's great to see you back. Flackbait is going to be your bartender tonight. He serves with, he pours with the best of them, and the lava lamp is in fact lighted to, let's see, that would be my left, your right, and that means that you can listen and chat at shrmedia.com. You can watch the show on the SHR Media Facebook page live or the YouTube channel. We don't water our drinks, just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all here at the Saloon. Nothing is sacred. The speech is free, but the booze is not. All we ask is that you flush the toilet, jiggle the handle, and don't forget to tip your waitress. Now, tonight is an interesting show because it's getting split up, as I'm trying to customarily do, into two kind of separate topics. I'm trying to see if that plays a little bit better. And the first hour, we're going to be talking to Ralph BENKO. Now, he is from the Alinsky Center. And if you're thinking to yourself, Alinsky, hey, I think I know that name. And a lot of people are thinking, oh, Alinsky. Where have I heard that before? Oh, that's right. That would be Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. So if you happen to be on the live channel right now on Facebook, I am holding up a copy of Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. This was originally written from a thesis in 1946, I think, and then this thing, not this specific copy, come on now, but originally was published in 1971, which was essentially a culmination of his life's work. And I don't know whether you call this full of schadenfreude or whether you call this just good timing or poor timing. Right after that book was published, this book, Rules for Radicals, in 1971, he passed away. Saul Alinsky passed away at the age of 63 from a heart attack, I think, in 1972. So if that's not pretty much the worst timing you can possibly think of, it's darn close. Then I put this all together, and maybe it's going to be overkill for hour two. I hope not, because I spent a lot of time trying to find just the right cuts. And most of the bulk of the second hour will be the House committee hearings questioning Peter Strzok. And I've focused on Trey Gowdy. I've focused on, I think Jim Jordan is in there, and then Louis Gohmert talking to Peter Strzok. And the reason that I'm going into, oh, by the way, thanks to everyone for being in chat already. Thanks to Mike John Pasqua. Thanks to Traveling Cynic, the cynic who travels. Thanks to Mary Brockman, and Peter Strzok is in here himself. Perhaps he just wants to hear how he sounded this afternoon. And that's great. Peter, great to see you. Anyway, the reason that I'm going to be playing all these cuts, and of course, weighing in with some of my scintillating opinion, which, I don't know, may or may not be scintillating, but I want you to hear. To me, the second hour is very important. And maybe the playing back of this stuff will become odious after a while. I hope not. Because I want you to hear and understand what it is that people that are full of themselves in the government, this is how they portray themselves. And the biggest question of all is, in my opinion, I think this guy is a sociopath. After listening to him, and of course, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I do have a copy of the DSM-5, though. Is that close? Anyway, that said, this is it's astounding in the depth and breadth of his incredible arrogance, and concomitantly his smugness. I wish you could see it. But I'm sure that I promise you this, you will be able to hear it literally in the tone of his voice. And at the end, I don't see how you can conclude anything other than that. Plus, the questions were spot on. You can see the soft coup that he clearly partook of, and in my opinion was pretty much a co-mastermind of that. And I will always go by saying that it was a soft coup, a continuing soft coup against the United States of America on a presidential nominee, Donald Trump, a president-elect, and I believe that it went over and continued with a sitting president. Now I'm going to be calling Ralph here, and once he picks up, we're going to be starting the interview.
Okay.
And Ralph, is that you, sir?
It is me, sir.
Okay, outstanding. I am so pleased to have you here tonight. Now, folks, I got to tell you this. I originally met Ralph BENKO last year at the 2017 Freedom Fest in Las Vegas. And what happened is he stopped by the SHR Media Broadcast booth, and he and I spoke over the air. And I subsequently discovered rather rapidly that he's the president and current president of the Alinsky Center. And yes, as I indicated prior, that would be the same Saul Alinsky who wrote the book that I held up earlier and the book that I have now. For those of you who are watching this show, Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. It's called A Pragmatic Primer for Realistic Radicals, and he wrote it in 1971. This publication basically is revered essentially as the playbook for leftist elements all around the world and across the globe. It's the source, by the way, of the word Alinskyite, and we're going to get into all of that. Now, knowing about the book, as I already did, even prior to Ralph BENKO sitting down at the booth, I thought an interview with Mr. BENKO would be interesting as hell, and indeed it was, but I always knew that I wanted to have him back on the show. And so hence he was kind enough to consent to return tonight for an hour's discussion of himself, the Alinsky Center, and other issues. But after reading that book, I didn't know quite what to do with it, but I did possess a fundamental question that I hadn't seen anybody else ask, that, in a way, Ralph BENKO really unveiled for me last year. And that question that I had was this. Who says that the premise of that book can't be used by anybody? Nothing says that it's locked in perpetuity by leftists. So why couldn't other elements utilize the concepts? People on the right, for example, conservatives, libertarians. Okay, well, hold that thought, because now we're going to talk about Ralph BENKO himself. He is president of the Alinsky Center, where Alinsky's son, David, by the way, is chairman. And Ralph BENKO was also nominated as a nonprofit blogger of the year in 2014 by the National Bloggers Club. He's the author of the Webster's Dictionary, How to Use the Web to Transform the World, which was awarded the Okay, here comes my French challenge. The Trophée des Choix des Internats in the World E-Democracy Awards 2010 from the World E-Democracy Forum, Paris, France, chosen by World Vote from among the 10 who are changing the world of politics and the internet. He's an internationally published weekly columnist writing about politics and policy, and he serves, this is interesting, he serves as an advisor to an editor of the Lehrman Institute's thegoldstandardnow.org, senior advisor to the American Principles Project, and he founded the Prosperity Caucus gathering of supply-side and free market economists, served on detail as a deputy general counsel to the President's Commission on Privatization and on White House agency staff under President Reagan. He holds a BA from Amherst College, a JD, Juris Doctorate from Boston University Law School, and is retired from the bar of the state of New York. And that's a damn heady CV, I'd say. And at first blush, kind of a confusing package, which includes supports of what a lot of people would say is one of the world's greatest known American communists. Or is that true? So that's what we're here to find out. And let's welcome Ralph BENKO to the Berserk Bobcat Saloon. And, of course, thank you, sir, ever so kindly to consent to such a late-night live appearance because you're on the East Coast, and right now it's 11:11 way over there. So welcome, sir, and how are you tonight?
Thank you, Mark. I'm regrettably sober at this late stage of the day, but that's a tribute to you and your listeners.
Thank you.
I've maintained my sobriety so way past my standard deposited time. And I'd like just to add one more confusing credential, and that is Gene Weingarten, the nationally syndicated columnist, Washington Post humorist, writes a column called Below the Beltway, referred to me as the second most conservative man in the world, just to embellish my notoriety a little bit further.
See, and that's the dichotomy that confuses the absolute hell out of me, is because anyone connected in any way whatsoever is generally pigeonholed as a leftist, a communist, a socialist with regard to rules for radicals. But that's an entirely different story. But here's what I want to do, Ralph. I want to start at the start, and that's this. What's your favorite kind of music?
Oh, I'm a Rolling Stones kind of guy.
Outstanding.
So, give me sympathy for the devil any day.
Okay, that's great. See, you are going to want to, by the way, at the break at the bottom of the hour, we break for about 5 minutes, and if you want to fill up, sir, because like I say at the end of my show, I consult with my KC 135 Kettle One refueling team. There's that as well. The other question I have is most people. Long ago, long lost to the vicissitudes of the internet somewhere, is I wrote a column about how the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and the Who defeated the communist revolution in America, and so it's the people just don't fully grasp what a wonderful force for liberty rock and roll was back in its heyday before I got old. Yeah, well, you and me, mister. I'm certainly a representative of that.
Don't get fooled. It's the Who, not the Rolling Stones, but just, Mark, don't get fooled again.
And a classic and a wonderful song, which also had Baba O'Reilly on it, if I'm not mistaken. Most people can be winnowed down to two types, like dog people or cat people. So which one are you?
Well, actually, there are 10 different versions of people. People who count in binary notation and people who don't.
Wow, okay. Like the ones and zeros. There we go.
Yeah, look, I'm a classical liberal in the Jeffersonian, Lockean sense. I know that sounds a little bit pretentious, but I believe that there are certain inalienable rights. Among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They cannot be overridden even by a majority of people. I believe that the government needs to be directed by the people rather than the people directed by the government.
Perfect.
And government is instituted among men to preserve our rights rather than to create our rights. And by the way, that perfectly describes Saul Alinsky, who absolutely detested big government and actively fought communism his entire life.
We will definitely get to that. I wrote down a list of questions, and I have to say that I know an hour is not going to cover a fraction of all the stuff that I'm curious about. And we will get to that tonight. We will get to that. Just out of curiosity, what are some of the magazines that you regularly read or to which you subscribe, either on the internet or cold, dead wood or stuff like that?
Sure. No, look, this may come as a shock to you, but let me try to inoculate you.
Okay.
My favorite, I love to read magazines that I disagree with.
I do too.
hate to read
Yes.
stuff that I agree with. And so consequently, I write for the American Spectator very regularly, and I revere the American Spectator. And occasionally I will read the National Review and Reason and so forth.
Right.
But I find myself really getting very quickly bored reading things that I completely agree with and I'm totally persuaded on. And so I would much rather go out and be reading Mother Jones and Rolling Stone and the New Yorker and the Atlantic Monthly and Counterpunch and publications that, consider me the scum of the earth and that disagree with everything I believe in and hold sacred, because I really want to find out where the soft spots in my narrative are.
Thank you.
And by reading my opponents, it holds me to a higher standard because I learn from them. And so, I love to read the left's publications, partly because it makes me more rigorous in my arguments, but partly also because, they lay their playbook open to the world to read. And, when your enemy tells you what his next move is going to be, if you're too lazy to go out there and do the homework to find out in advance of his making his move,
shame on you. Shame on you.
You probably, he deserves to win if you don't have the wit to hold yourself to the higher standard, to find out, to read what he or she tells you he's going to do next, and to take preemptive action. So I love reading the left. It's also, they've got much sexier writers than we do.
Exactly.
For the most part.
Exactly. I got to agree with you entirely. What do you think might be the best book that you've read recently?
Oh my, that's.
Are you a fan? Let me put it this way then: are you a fan of fiction or more of nonfiction? Oh,
I used to be a huge science fiction fan. I still have an autographed copy of the Foundation trilogy that Isaac Asimov autographed to me at a science fiction convention way back in the 60s. But I've found that reality, if we can dare to use that word, has so transcended science fiction that it's just, take the red pill Neo. There's just no point in reading science fiction anymore. Reality has gotten much weirder. And for your listeners who want to dig more deeply into that, there's a wonderful little book called Reality Isn't What It Used to Be by a gentleman named Walter Truett Anderson that is probably the best book on postmodernism I've ever read. And it's an absolute delight. So I read nonfiction pretty much exclusively, but mostly I read long form essays now. Very rarely books, because I've measured it, and my attention span, according to the most recent research, is a little shorter than that of a goldfish. Goldfish attention span is now about 8 seconds. Is about 8 seconds. Mine clocks in a little less than that. Yeah. So it's hard for me to get through, whole books.
I too am likewise challenged. Let's go back to your youth. Where were you born and where were you raised?
I was born in Queens, New York, just like Donald J. Trump.
Okay.
But unfortunately, unlike Donald J. Trump, I was deported when I was about 2.5 years old to Albany, New York.
Tragic.
A delightful city. Well, tragic for me, because otherwise I would clearly be a billionaire like the Donald now. But from the point of view of the quality of life, Albany is the hidden sweet spot of the world. So it was very graced to grow up in Albany, New York. It's just a gorgeous little gem of a city that is largely unknown. I went to high school there. Then I went off to college, Amherst College for undergraduate. Came back to Albany, went off to Boston University Law School, came back to Albany, and then I think on July 7th, 1985, which was July 8th, 1985, which was the day after the first birthday of my daughter, Sarah, BENKO, I self-deported to Washington, D.C. to join the Reagan Revolution, to join the supply side revolution and the Reagan Revolution.
See,
and I've been looking for an off-ramp ever since, but unfortunately they're all sealed off.
You're the anti-rules for radicals guy, which is why I found you so damned intriguing when I first talked to you.
Thank you. But I'm totally. It's a slur, and you'll be hearing from my attorney in the morning. I'm totally pro rules for radicals. Mark.
Well, when did you become? I'm sure you became politically aware at some point. So when was that, and or how did that occur, where your political awareness just went ding?
I read a book called The Way the World Works by Jude Wanniski, who was Jack Kemp's guru back in about 1981 or 1982.
Okay.
And Mark, I got woke.
Okay. I remember Jack Kemp.
Well, The Way the World Works by Jude Wanniski was the fundamental charter for the supply side movement, which called for reducing marginal tax rates. The top marginal income tax rate back then was 70%.
Oh, yeah.
Reagan dropped it to 28%. It's now crept up to about 39.6%, but it's still a hell of a lot lower than it was in its bad old days that Bernie Sanders would like to return us to. And Jude also wanted to stabilize the dollar, preferably through the gold standard. And I became very enamored of the gold standard as a mechanism for equitable prosperity, for economic growth, privileging working people slightly over, privileging labor over capital slightly. Jude was a Marxist, by the way. And so when I read The Way the World Works, it rearranged all of my electrons, and I became passionate for the first time in my life about politics and policy. I hooked up with a great man named Louis E. Lerman, who ran for governor of New York State and lost by just a few votes to Mario Cuomo. But Lou was also a member of the Reagan Gold Commission, and he summoned me as one of the 23 experts to testify in favor of the gold standard, to testify about the gold standard back in, I think it was 1981. And that's where I lost my political virginity, Mark, and that's where my virtue went out the window.
Funny, a lot of people don't realize, excuse me, that it was Richard Nixon who essentially took us off the gold standard. Thanks,
well,
Nixon.
It was actually Lyndon Johnson who took us off the gold standard, and it was Richard Nixon who made it official. So there's plenty of discredit to go around.
I got to ask you.
But what's really weird is that the guy who saved the gold standard, at least temporarily, was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. After World War I, the world moved from the gold standard to the fakey interwar gold standard at Genoa, Italy, in 1922. Not just to bore your listeners' socks right off, and that led to a raising of commodities prices by about 50%, but the pinning of the gold price to its historic level of $20.67 an ounce. And due to this discrepancy, that precipitated the Great Depression. And FDR was advised by the greatest commodities price expert economist of his day, a man named George Warren, almost completely forgotten now, but he was on the cover of Time magazine during his day. And he said, you have to, in order you have to raise the price level back. You have to raise the price of gold 50% to match the rise in the price level. And so FDR, without really knowing what he was doing, but following the advice of Warren, raised the price of gold from $20.67 an ounce to $35 an ounce, which immediately made the Great Depression begin to lift. But since FDR didn't really know what he was doing, they sterilized the gold inflows, and we went back into a double dip of the Great Depression. And so there, I've taxed your listeners' patience enough. The point being that if we went back to the gold standard, or went forward to the gold standard at something like its current price of $1,200 an ounce, we could probably be getting 5 or 6 or even 7% GDP growth, which would solve which would eliminate the deficit and make Social Security completely solvent and Medicare completely solvent, as long as we kept economic growth rates up above 3.3% sustainably. And all of your listeners, if we had kept to gold standard economic growth rates, all of your listeners would be making 50% more than they are today. Their net worth would be 50% more than they are today, and we would have never had a 2008 meltdown, because the gold standard is the best recipe for equitable prosperity that's ever been tried.
We got about 3 more minutes before the bottom of the hour break, and I'm going to ask you a question that I ask everybody that I interview for the first time, and that's this. I usually say that everybody encounters, and I'm sure you're going to begin to answer the question. I apologize in advance. I'm going to have to interrupt you for the bottom of the hour break, but when we come back, you can completely fulfill that answer. But the question I have is this. I say that everyone encounters what I term pivotal moments in their lives, when their life appears to be going like one direction, and then boom, something occurs that becomes a fundamental game changer. Now, I've had 3 pivotal moments in my life, and I'll tell you what, we're 2 minutes before the break. After I ask this question, I think I may just go to the break early so that you can think if there's anything particularly that you want to talk about. So when we come back after the break, can you tell us about some of your pivotal moments, something that really impacted you in a personal and soul-searching manner, something that in reflection you recognize was one or several real impactful moments? Folks, we are listening to Ralph BENKO. He is president and so much more of the Alinsky Center. We're going to take a break, and we're going to be right back. And with that lengthy question, I'm going to be really curious, because I always want to hear what everybody that I talk to for the first time, what they say really had an effect on their lives. So, folks, don't go away. You're listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin right here on the SHR Media Network. You're in the Berserk Bobcat Saloon on the radio show.
You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
The new show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny, on shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, every Wednesday, live and direct on the SHR Media Network, shrmedia.com. Be there.
Human by race, Christian by faith, American by nationality, and conservative by choice. Reverend Ralph J. Chittum Sr. is the right guy on SHR Media from 8:05 to 9 p.m., Monday through Friday. And if on the rare occasion I am ever wrong, I will still always be right. The right guy on SHR Media.
When dirty politicians, shadow governments, and deceptive Islam blind the world with fake stream media smoke, their only fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through shrmedia.com, highplainstalkradio.com, and the Western Free Radio Network at Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes for a different perspective weekly on the Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender ever,
because truth is not always pleasant.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
Hey, who's going to take Sean's chair?
I'll run the buttons if you want.
The what?
The slider
what?
thingies. Those
what?
things.
We have those?
Yeah, right over there.
Where?
It's on the board. That damn technology.
Fucking technology.
I know. What are we going to call it?
Call what?
The show.
What?
The show.
What show?
The new show, Wednesdays. Every Wednesday on shrmedia.com. 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. Sackheads.
Against tyranny.
There you
Against
go.
Against tyranny.
I like that. Let's do it.
You guys are porked.
Hello. I'm Tim Hart. I'm the guy BZ hires, due to his shameless contract with the SHR Media Network, to voice his promos. He'd like me to tell you that the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be found on SHR Media Network, Spreaker, and YouTube every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American media maggots won't. You'll find that the speech is free, but the drinks are not. There, in the saloon, just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, BZ is sending his personal drones of freedom into the wheelhouses and ossicles of lovers of sovereignty and liberty nationally and globally. Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, BZ swears that no rights were harmed in the making of this promo.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we're back. You are, in fact, listening to me, the Bloviating Zeppelin, right here on the SHR Media Network. We're live and direct, 2 miles away from the locus of evil on the entire left coast. I am broadcasting live right now in the SHR Media sumptuous and palatial studios, 2 miles away from the evil belly of the beast, the capital of California, Sacramento, the Bill Mill, so to speak. And welcome back. We are talking to Ralph BENKO. He's the president of the Alinsky Center. And before we left on that, I asked a question. I said that there are many critical, what I call pivotal moments in people's lives that they become game changers. And what might maybe one or two of those have been in your life, Ralph BENKO?
Yeah, well, Mark, I'm going to take unfair advantage of your question, and first I'm going to duck it, and I'm going to quote from the movie Casablanca,
okay,
where Rick is walking off at the end, is leaving Casablanca, and he turns to her and says, "I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problem of 3 little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world."
Okay.
Someday you'll understand that. Now, here's looking at you, kid. So what was game-changing for me is doesn't amount to a hill of beans. I've already told you about Jude Winitsky's work. I'm going to briefly touch base on Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, which is just just a darn shame that it's so misunderstood.
Let me
bounce to 2 future-oriented things that are going to be game-changing in the future. But go ahead and ask your question.
Let me bypass that because we don't have a ton of time. So I have to ask you, the fundamental question is, okay, why Saul Alinsky? Why the Alinsky Center? What attracted you to Saul Alinsky? What resonated in you about him?
Because Saul Alinsky was a classical liberal who believed that the people should direct the government and that people should stand up for their own rights rather than becoming clients of either a government or a corporation. And that really resonated for me. But more important than that is Saul Alinsky's sombrero has been culturally appropriated by the left.
Okay.
Saul Alinsky hated big government, loathed it. He called LBJ, he publicly attacked LBJ's war on poverty as, quote, political pornography, unquote. He worked with Cardinal Montini of Milan, who later went on to become Pope Paul VI, which is hardly anybody's idea of a left-wing nut, to break the Italian Communist Party. He created a strategy for Cardinal Montini to destroy the Italian Communist Party. All of these, and his guru, the person who taught him organizing, was labor leader John L. Lewis, who was both the founder of United Mine Workers, the founder of the Congress of Industrial Equality, which is the second half of the AFL-CIO, since the AFL wouldn't let his members in. John L. Lewis was a Republican and supply-sider. He allowed the mine owners to reduce their labor forces and remain competitive, so long as the continuing miners, continuing workers, participated in the productivity increases with pay increases. So the people who accuse Saul Alinsky of having communist sympathy, Saul Alinsky was cleared by J. Edgar Hoover's FBI of having any kind of communist ties or sympathies, and J. Edgar Hoover was no commie simp. So there's been this fog of bullshit, if I can say that on this non-FCC regulated
Of course
venue.
you can.
Thank you. That claims that Alinsky is somehow a leftist, was a communist or a socialist. He was absolutely not. The reason that he's accused of this, though, and by the way, he carried a concealed handgun. Okay, he carried concealed. His son still owns the gun because he was receiving death threats from the KKK because he worked with African American communities not to, quote, save them. He didn't believe in. He said, if I could save them, I wouldn't. People have to save themselves. He went into the inner cities of places like Rochester, New York, to teach the African Americans how to fight against racial discrimination. And the reason that he's typed as a left-winger is because he stood for social justice. And I'm really pissed off at myself and my colleagues on the right because social justice, we've defaulted on this, is an incredibly important conservative value. And by dropping the ball on that, not talking about it, because there's nothing that creates social justice better than capitalism. There's nothing that brings about, improves people's lives better than free markets. I flabbergast people, a la the Alinsky Center, by saying, by asking them who was the greatest free market economist, free market politician of the 20th century. And they go, oh, Reagan, or they go, Thatcher. I go, no, it's Deng Xiaoping, the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, who said to get rich is glorious and unleash China from its Maoist communist shackles. And China grew for 30 years at 10% a year. We think we're doing great if we grow at 3%. So, to me, the power of the free markets, the power of equitable prosperity is the game changer, and I'm passionate about that. And in that respect, let me just tell your listeners about 2 places that they can look to for future transformation. And one is on Facebook, there's a wonderful page has almost 1 million people called Capitalism. and with a capitalism is freedom, with a subtitle that says "Living well is the best revenge."
Yep.
And I've recently met the proprietor of this page, and he's a genius. He's a native genius. Steve Forbes is a mentor of his. And so those of you who've not had the pleasure of joining Capitalism is Freedom, you've got a treat in store. Go to Facebook, sign up. It's a wonderful distillation of that philosophy. And the other thing is my old friend George Gilder, the author of The Bible of Reaganomics, Wealth and Poverty, sold 1 million copies. George was the most quoted author by President Reagan. Has written a new book called Life After Google, and it's about the blockchain, of which Bitcoin is the most famous version. And George Gilder's book, Life After Google, The Fall of Big Data and the Rise of the Blockchain Economy, is, in my humble opinion, an absolute game changer for where the economy of the world is going to go. So rather than telling you about what the little hills of beans for this little guy, I direct your and your listeners' attention to Capitalism is a Freedom at Facebook and George Gilder's book, which publishes in about a week, called Life After Google.
You and I met at Freedom Fest in 2017. Yes. Now, Freedom Fest, for those people who are not aware, is for those, obviously, who are interested in freedom, liberty, and it attracts, and correct me if I'm wrong, probably one of the strongest libertarian contingents in the United States, and it's held every year. And this year,
it's the libertarian Woodstock.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
But see, that makes me wonder, though. Are you affiliated with any particular party, or you said you were a classic liberal? And
I'm a self-loathing Republican, Mark.
Okay, so you're a registered Republican. Got that.
Right.
So, and the reason I want to bring this out is because a lot of people are going to say, or at least attempt to say, well, look, how can that person be a classic liberal, a registered Republican, if they're interested or support rules for radicals from Saul Alinsky, and my God, they're a president of the Alinsky Center. It seems it's just absolutely conflicting.
No, not if they've actually read rules for radicals. So let's start with the word radicals. Okay, Saul was absolutely a provocateur. He wanted to trigger people. He wanted to make them think. He wanted to confront them.
I love that.
He was not interested in conventional thinkers. He was not interested in Hallmark cards and bromides. He once said a liberal is someone with one foot placed firmly in thin air. Okay, he hated social workers, and he had total contempt for what you and I would call liberals, maybe, meaning, sort of fuzzy-headed leftists. Okay, Saul was not who you think. He had 13 wonderful tactical rules that make you effective, but he also had chapters on ethics, and he was just unflinching about doing the right thing. And most people talk about the rules, but detach it from the ethics. And when Hillary Clinton wrote her honors thesis at Wellesley about rules for radicals, a virtuoso work by a child prodigy. When Hillary Rodham wrote this, she was probably 20 years old. And you can download it on the internet. It's called There Is Only the Fight. She repudiated the unethical use of Saul Alinsky's work by the new left of her day. And so a lot of people know about Alinsky's tactical rules, but very few people know about his ethical rules, which are profound. And so I'm trying to make Alinsky's ethics as available to the people as his tactics. You can go to AlinskyCenter.com. It's our website. We're unfunded, and therefore we're very underpowered. But it can give your listeners, if they go to AlinskyCenter.com, a taste of who Alinsky really was and what he really taught. So I'm not sleeping with the enemy with Alinsky. Alinsky was one of us. He's up there with Jefferson. He's our era's Thomas Jefferson. He was very, very deeply engaged in liberty, And I like the paradox. I like the fact that people go, what? Whiskey Tango Foxtrot?
Right.
But there is absolutely no contradiction between me, a powerfully committed conservative, and my devotion to Saul Alinsky and Saul Alinsky's work.
Here's what I think is the crux of the biscuit, and we're coming to it. And I think this is the point that I attempted to, like I said, there was a bell that went on after I read that book, and it was like this little light went, and it's...
Wait a second. That was a sound, not a light. You can't fool me. I'm a lot smarter than I look.
Okay, are you sure? Are you watching? I see. If you're not watching, how do you tell? But the book Rules for Radicals, to me, seemed like nothing more than a tool on paper. And Alinsky, he's credited for being an organizational genius. But my little bell ding was, wait. Can't tools be used by anybody who picks them up? And then
yes,
that's when it illuminated.
Yes, and Dick Armey, when he was head of FreedomWorks, gave thousands of copies of Rules for Radicals away to his organizers. So you're absolutely right about that, Mark. But let me just focus in on one misunderstood word, because it's really at the center of things.
Okay.
Radical does not mean hooligan. Radical means to get to the root of things. If you look up the word radical in the dictionary, it means the root. Alinsky was about getting to the root of social justice and personal dignity, which he said, look, if I gave you if I could give you freedom, I wouldn't, because freedom without dignity is deficient. You have to fight for your freedom. Freedom is a derivative value to dignity. If you stand up and demand being respected, which is the definition of dignity, you will fight and you will create your liberty. If somebody gives you liberty, if you turn liberty into an entitlement, okay, you got shit. You have to make your own. You have to create your own liberty through your dignity. And to me, this is a profound and moving message. And to David, Saul's son, who recruited me to be the president of the Alinsky Center, this is a profound and moving message. And you should really have him on, because he's the son. I'm just the paladin.
Okay, but I met you, so I had you, and that would probably be an excellent idea. And I would submit also that words have meaning, and because words have meaning, also in context with that, words have been hijacked. So I would suggest that perhaps radical is one of the words that has been hijacked, because now, at least today, it's always associated with people on the left who are violent, Antifa, etc. But that's not the biggest epiphany. That's not the biggest epiphany. I submit to you, sir, and we're talking to Ralph BENKO, president of the Alinsky Center, and a whole lot more other stuff. Oh, my God, the articles that I saw that you have written is staggering, which leads to so many more questions than what we have time for tonight. But I have to ask you then, isn't it true then that one of the biggest secrets in the world today is hiding in plain sight? And I'd like to make this linkage, and that's this. That is to say, the guy with the dead orange cat on his head, Donald Trump, and that book. Because I also thought, wait, back the hell up. Back up, Jack. Is his playbook now that? It made me ask the question.
Yeah, well, let me answer your question. Donald Trump is not a reader, and so the chances that he's read Rules for Radicals is like negative, okay? But I've read Rules for Radicals, and I wrote an article. I used to be a weekly columnist, political columnist for Forbes.com. I wrote about 400 columns. If anybody has way too much time on their hands or is seeking a cure for insomnia, Google RalphBenkoForums.com, and you'll find them. One of those, and if you want to read about what I've written about Saul Alinsky, RalphBenkoForums.com, Saul Alinsky. There's a lot of good stuff about Saul Alinsky there. Donald Trump uses proficiently, better than anybody else in the 2016 race, 12 out of 13 of Saul Alinsky's rules. Period. Full stop.
And I read that article, and that's why I brought it up tonight, because that is an incredibly salient point, and that's what I wanted to hit home.
Yes, Donald Trump is a natural. Okay, he's an elemental genius, and one of the manifestations of his elemental genius. I mean, whether you love him or hate him, I actually wrote in my fiance's name on the presidential ballot in 2016 because she's clearly the best qualified to run the country.
Good man. But, you're a good man.
Yeah. Look, he's an elemental genius, and he proficiently uses 12 out of 13 of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. The one that he hasn't used to my satisfaction, and why he didn't earn my vote, was the cost of a program is a better solution, and so I'm not convinced that he may not have a Achilles heel. I think his tariff wars are potentially catastrophic. I am a generous pro-immigration as the grandchild of immigrants kind of guy, and I think his deportation stuff is anti-liberty and anti-prosperity. But you know what? He's the president of the United States, and he's a billionaire, and I'm just a working stiff and a voter sometimes. So I don't really have the standing to take him on. But for those who really want to peer deep down into the sources of Donald Trump's power, they can do no better than to read Rules for Radicals and see how masterfully he uses 12 out of 13 of Alinsky's rules, tactical rules.
And like I said, the book, which I have a copy of right here, and if people are watching on either Facebook or YouTube, this is it, Rules for Radicals. And again, emphasizing, one of the primary reasons that I wanted to have you on tonight is because you have an entirely different interpretation of what the hell this book means, and I found that then in 2017 and still now today absolutely engaging. And you're right, you should read things on, quote, the other side, unquote. I subscribe to The Economist. I read all sorts of stuff. I don't just stay straight with all my favorite blogs that happen to be on the right. You need to know what people are thinking, and you need to know what people are saying. And that's another way of, it's a tool. It's a tool, and anybody can use it. Anybody can pick up that book. Anybody can look at those principles.
And it's a powerful tool. And for those of us who on the right, and I'm a man of the right, I'm a proud man of the right. I'm the second most conservative man in the world, God damn it, according to the Washington Post magazine.
Well, wait, who's the first then? They didn't delineate the first then, did they?
Yes, they did. His name is Benjamin Sedeka. He's a dear friend of mine, and he lives in the Holy Land. He commutes between Palestine and Israel, and he lives by a 3,000-year-old biblical code, which makes him more conservative even than me.
Okay.
So unless he is a member of the Israelite Samaritan people, the Good Samaritans, there are actually 800 of them left ethnically, tribally, culturally left in the world, divided between Holon outside of Tel Aviv and Nablus on Mount Gerizim outside of Nablus in the West Bank. And when Benny and I ran into Gene Weingarten at a party being thrown by Heritage Foundation a few years ago, he decided that Benny was the most conservative man in the world because he lives by a 3,000-year-old biblical code. And I was the second most conservative man in the world because my advocacy is the gold standard. The end.
And the 10,000-year-old man, Mel Brooks, is the oldest man in the world. And so we have all spoken on that.
There you go.
We got about 5 minutes left before the end of the show, and I know this is a massive, overarching question. It's almost too big for human ken. But I have to back up, and also in consideration of the book, and you are clearly an educated man with great insight who's done a lot of stuff and has seen a lot of things in your years. I just have to ask this demanding question is in consideration of everything, because I've been on this planet for 7 decades. I don't know if you where you
got me beat by about 4 years.
Okay, so in consideration of that, I have never seen a political climate as it exists today. I have never seen D.C. as it is today. I would say that one of the things that in retrospect we will thank Donald Trump for is exposing the true nature of D.C. However, that having been said, can it be repaired? I really don't know. What can we do, if anything, about our politics in D.C.?
We have better. Mark, I don't want to shake you up. Actually, I do, because I'm a provocateur.
Damn it, do it. Do it.
We have better political representation than we deserve.
Okay. All right. Now justify that.
Okay, America was designed to be a republic, not a democracy.
Correct. If we can keep it.
If we keep, very good. For Benjamin Franklin, at the close of the Constitutional Convention in 1787. I wrote a whole column about that. So the fact is that America's future actually depends probably on your listeners, and nothing more and nothing less. So we're fucked. People, you can't just elect people and let them, and not give them your ongoing guidance and expect a good result. I've been in Washington for almost 40 years, and I know all of the secrets about Washington inside.
I'm sure you do.
I'm going to share with your listeners here for the first time the deepest, darkest secret about Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And that is the guys on Capitol Hill who basically control everything, ultimately, are dying to hear from your listeners. They are they're called, your listeners are called constituents in Washington speak, and the constituents outrank on Capitol Hill in Congress. Forget the Senate. The Senate doesn't matter. Okay, in the House of Representatives, constituent pressure outranks money, media, and most pressure groups, with a few exceptions like the NRA and the AARP. Okay, and sometimes even outranks them. What the folks back home are thinking, and not only thinking but caring enough to pick up the damn phone, or even better, write a letter, not an email, write a letter to their congressman or congresswoman and say, this is what I think about that. And to do this on a consistent basis is the single most powerful force in politics, and nobody uses it. Most people will throw their Nikes at the TV screen or complain or bitch or moan or whatever, but they don't stop to think, I'm going to write a letter to my congressman every month about the things that I care the most about. Okay? They care more than anything else about what the folks back home are thinking. And the folks back home are not telling them what they think. So the big breakdown in politics doesn't have anything to do with CNN or Fox or the internet or net neutrality or blah, 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 blah. By the way, net neutrality is horrible. It's a euphemism for price control, and that's another topic for another show of yours.
And I completely concur with that.
Right. But your listeners have dropped the ball. They have the power, if they choose to exercise it, to direct their representatives in about 80 to 90% of the cases, which are the important ones, not the hot button cases like, abortion invading countries and stuff like that, which are sexy, but most of the business of government is really boring. And there is just, I've written about this in a magazine called the Transpartisan Review. If they look up Ralph BENKO, Transpartisan Review, A Republic, If You Can Keep It, is the title of the article. It lays out specifically all we need to do if about 60,000 people, which is probably a fraction of your listenership and your viewership,
I know,
Mark,
that's true,
were to engage and organize themselves and to consistently give direction to their elected member of Congress, okay, everything would sort itself out really fast. But if we don't do that, then
shame on us again.
Shame on us. Exactly right. Shame on us. But we've got the power. If we don't choose to exercise it, well, oh well. You know, we got nobody to blame but ourselves. Or as Pogo once famously said, we have met the enemy, and he is us.
He is us. Yep. That is the perfect way to go out, and that's the perfect expression to go out, because we are the people, and the government responds to us. The government wants us to respond to it, but that's not the way things really do work. So I got to ask
Mark,
you.
That's pure Alinsky. I'm sorry to break it to you.
Okay. And that's another reason why I wanted to have you on tonight, so people can hear another perspective of what this book really means. So I got to ask you one final fundamental question. Can we have you back in the saloon? Because I didn't even touch a fraction of the questions that I had. Not a fraction.
You've got a great show. You were the belle of the internet. B-E-L-L-E.
Thank you.
I could be a little sexist here, and I will always make time to appear on your show. The only thing is that I know the guys from the Dos Equis ad, the most interesting people in the world.
Right.
And you should really ask me to direct them to you, because I'm nothing compared to the people that I know. And so you should have David Alinsky on. You should have the genius behind Capitalism is Liberty on Facebook on. There's a whole lot of people who you and your provincial California ways should really should really open your gates to, because you'd have a great time with them.
Right. Me and I'm surrounded by all these libertines.
Yes. That's nothing. Don't slur the good name of libertine, dude. They're a whole lot more fun than the libertarians who are really just argumentarians in disguise.
I'll believe you on that one. So,
thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we have been listening to Ralph BENKO tonight. He is president of the Alinsky Center, and truly he is so much more. Thank you again so very much for staying up so damned late. Ralph BENKO, you take care. You have our most sincere gratitude for talking with us tonight.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure. And not just up, but sober. Don't forget.
Yes, too. Great. Good night, sir, and thank you very much.
Good night, Mark. Good night.
Now that was an interview. And this is a break.
You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
The new show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, every Wednesday. Live and direct on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
Human by race, Christian by faith, American by nationality, and conservative by choice. Reverend Ralph J. Chittum Sr. is the right guy on SHR Media from 8:05 to 9 p.m., Monday through Friday. And if on the rare occasion I am ever wrong, I will still always be right. The right guy on SHR Media.
When dirty politicians, shadow governments, and deceptive Islam blind the world with fake stream media smoke, their only fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through shrmedia.com, highplanestalkradio.com, and the Western Free Radio Network at Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes for a different perspective weekly on the Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender ever,
because truth is not always pleasant.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
Hey, who's going to take Sean's chair?
I'll run the buttons if you want.
The what?
The slider
what?
thingies. Those
what?
things.
We have those?
Yeah, right over there.
Where?
It's on the board. That damn technology.
Fucking technology.
I know. What are we going to call it?
Call what?
The show.
What?
The show.
What show?
The new show, Wednesdays. Every Wednesday on shrmedia.com. 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. Sackheads.
Against tyranny.
There you
Against
go.
tyranny.
I like that. Let's do it.
You guys are porked.
Hello, I'm Tim Hart. I'm the guy BZ hires due to his shameless contract with the SHR Media Network to voice his promos. He'd like me to tell you that the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be found on SHR Media Network, Spreaker, and YouTube every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American media maggots won't. You'll find that the speech is free, but the drinks are not. There, in the saloon, just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, BZ is sending his personal drones of freedom into the wheelhouses and ossicles of lovers of sovereignty and liberty nationally and globally. Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, BZ swears that no rights were harmed in the making of this promo.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Wow. That was a first hour worth paying for. And you guys are finally starting to get your money. Your money's worth, I should say. Speaking of money's worth, and my thanks to Ralph BENKO. I started doing some research on Ralph, and he gave a lot of books and quotations and whatnot that you can look at. And I started doing some research on him, and I came up with article after article after article after article. And he really is a dude on the right. I mean, he's written for the Washington Times, the American Spectator. A lot of his stuff was at American Spectator. I read articles about him on Forbes. He knows Steve Forbes. We've met Steve Forbes at Freedom Fest. Steve is really down to earth, kind of a cool cat. He had some bourbon with us, so we knocked glasses. We didn't knock boots, okay? Stop that right there. Get that out of your brain housing group. We knocked bourbon glasses with Steve Forbes in 2016. Had a great time at Freedom Fest. We're sorry we couldn't make it there this year, but things like that just unfortunately didn't work out. That having been said, something very significant occurred today, and the reason that I want to go into it for the bulk of the remaining hour, and I may end up going into overtime, maybe a minute or two, I'm not sure, just to give you a little bit of a heads up, because I want you to hear these tete-a-tetes back and forth, and the fake, basically the deal is Peter Strzok, the FBI agent, was involved in some public house hearings today, and I have focused in on interviews of Strzok by first Trey Gowdy, second by Jim Jordan, and third by Louis Gohmert. And the first one in particular is a little lengthy. Of course, I will be jumping in at appropriate times with salient and appropriate, of course, comments. But I want you to hear, this is an individual who is perfectly representative of what altogether too many people in government today have become, including the FBI, my much vaunted FBI. I am so incredibly disappointed at them. I'm disappointed at the DOJ. I'm disappointed at just about every alphabet agency you can think of. I will still go back and say that this was an attempted soft coup in Washington, D.C., and Peter Strzok had a great deal to do with it. So we're going to start with Representative Trey Gowdy of South Carolina, I believe. And he is speaking to Peter Strzok. And if anyone has ever heard, and everybody here has heard Trey Gowdy eviscerate people, as well as Jim Jordan and Louis Gohmert. But the reason I want to play this to you is, yes, you know what kind of questions are going to be coming from those three representatives, but you must listen to the response, the tone and tenor of the response, and the umbrage that this individual takes at even that any of those people even have the temerity to question him in the first place.
Chairman, Agent Strzok, the FBI investigation into potential Russia collusion with the Trump campaign began on July 31st, 2016. You drafted the originating document. You approved the originating document. You were the point of contact on the originating document, and the FBI has represented to Congress that nothing from an investigative standpoint with respect to Russian collusion and the Trump campaign began before July 31st, 2016.
This is very important right off the bat, the timeline.
But 10 days before the investigation even began, 10 days before you drafted the originating document, approved the originating document, was the point of contact on the originating document, 10 days before the investigation began, which the department you work for says nothing was done before July 31st. You said Trump is a disaster. I have no idea how destabilizing his presidency would be. And because you struggled a couple of weeks ago with a word that I thought had a commonly accepted definition, I'm going to go ahead and give you the definition of destabilizing. The first one kind of is obvious. It's to make unstable.
He hasn't even replied yet, and there is, I swear to fuck, there is a smirk on Peter Strzok's face. I'm not kidding.
The second one caught my attention, the second dictionary definition. To cause something such as a government to be incapable of functioning or surviving. That's a pretty significant allegation to make 10 days before you even began to investigate someone. So that was before July 31st. I want to ask you in that first week, we'll go ahead and up it to 8 days, between July 31st and August 8th, how many interviews did you conduct related to the alleged collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign?
So, Congressman, as you know, counsel for the FBI, based on the special counsel's equities, has instructed me not to answer questions about the ongoing investigation.
I'm asking for a number.
Russian attempts to interfere.
Agent Strzok, I'm asking for a number. I haven't gotten to the names. How many people had you interviewed between the beginning of it on July 31st and August the 8th? It's an 8-day time period. We're a week into an investigation. How many people had you interviewed?
Congressman, I understand your question. I appreciate it, and I would very much like to answer. But as I've stated, as you know, that counsel of the FBI, based on the special counsel's equities, have directed me not to answer any questions about the ongoing investigation into Russian...
So right off the bat, Peter Strzok is refusing to answer questions. And further, it's the FBI itself that is telling him not to answer the questions. What the fuck happened to my FBI?
Attempts to interfere.
The gentleman will suspend and the clock will suspend. Mr. Strzok, you are under subpoena and are required to answer the question. Are you objecting to the question? If so, please state your objection.
Mr. Chairman, I object.
The gentleman does not have standing to object. There is no
point of order.
This is Chair Bob Goodlatte, by the way.
No point of order here.
Point of order, it should be heard.
Gentleman will state.
Bob Goodlatte is the Judicial Committee chair, and he is sitting as chair right there.
Point of order.
My point of order is that intentionally or otherwise, this demand puts Mr. Strzok in an impossible position. He is still an employee of the FBI, and
This is Gerald Nadler, by the way. He's a Democrat from New York.
FBI counsel has instructed him not to answer the question.
The gentleman's...
If we have a problem with this policy, we should take it up with the FBI, not badger Mr. Strzok.
The gentleman's point of order is not well taken.
It's right on point.
No, it's not.
That was Goodlatte in response.
Mr. Strzok, are you objecting to the question? And if so, please state your objection.
Mr. Chairman, two things. One, I do not believe I am here under subpoena. I believe I am here voluntarily. Second, I will not, based on direction
Incorrect. He was in fact proffered a subpoena
of the FBI to me. Based on that, I will not answer that question because it goes to matters which are related to the ongoing investigations being under.
By the way, let me point this out too. Are you cognizant of the fact that Peter Strzok is the former Deputy Assistant Director for the entire Counterintelligence Division of the FBI? That was his position. He was the number... This is something that needs to be emphasized. At one point, he was the number 4 most powerful individual within the FBI. And that power was afforded to him. And you can see what he did with it.
Taken by the special
Mr.
counsel's
Strzok,
office.
you have not stated a valid legal basis for not responding to a question directed to you by a member of the United States House of Representatives, and you are overruled.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Let me continue. Your testimony is essential to this hearing and to our oversight and information.
We haven't even started, and the Democrats they're being obstructionists again right off the bat.
Information gathering functions with regard to the actions taken and decisions made by the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 2016 and 2017. I am specifically directing you to answer the question in response to our subpoena, not with
smirk on his face on Peter Strzok.
Standing your objection.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Strzok, please be advised that you can either comply with the committee's directive to answer the question or refuse to do so, the latter of which will place you at risk of a contempt citation and potential criminal liability.
Point of order.
Do you understand that?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
That's Nadler, the Democrat, again.
The question is directed to the witness.
And I have a point of order before he answers the question.
The point of order is not well taken until...
You don't know what the point of order is. You can't say it's not well taken.
The point of order, the witness will answer the question.
Mr. Chairman, I raise my point of order, and I insist on it.
What is the point of order?
The United States Attorney's Manual instructs department personnel not to respond to questions about the existence of an ongoing investigation or comment on its nature or progress. In a letter to Congressman John Linder in 2000.
Let me give you some insight. When you do this to Trey Gowdy and you start quoting rules and regulations, ... that's called a clue.
Referred to as the Linder letter, the department made this policy explicitly applicable to requests from Congress. Quote, although Congress has a clearly legitimate interest in determining how the department enforces statutes, congressional inquiries during the pendency of a matter pose an inherent threat to the integrity of the department's law enforcement and litigation functions, unquote. Therefore, the question being directed at the witness is out of order. The witness's declination to answer it as against the instructions of the FBI pursuant to FBI policy, which is necessary so as not to allow us to subvert an ongoing criminal investigation. He is right. And he should not answer the question.
The gentleman has not stated a valid point of order.
I will appeal the ruling of the chair in that case.
Nonetheless, the United States Supreme Court has recognized that it is unquestionably the duty of all citizens to cooperate with the Congress in its efforts to obtain the facts needed for intelligent legislative action. It is their unremitting obligation to respect...
Let's go back to the original point. He was asking not for names. Trey Gowdy was not asking for names. He was asking for a number of individuals. That's all.
The dignity of the Congress and its committees and to testify fully with respect to matters within the province of proper investigation.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, you know, or we all know, that if we were to ask a question of a witness about a military secret, if we were to ask him, how does the H-bomb work? He could not answer that question. This is the same thing.
That's not the question he asked, you dumb shit.
Stated, that is a classification issue, not an issue of whether or not this is a valid question for which...
I appeal the ruling of the chair. He has ruled that it's not a point of order.
That is not a ruling. Mr. Strzok?
Mr. Chairman, I insist on my point of order, and I insist on
Mr. Strzok,
appealing the ruling of the chair.
Mr. Strzok, knowing the advice that
Point
I
of order,
have given
Mr.
you,
Chairman. Point of order. I believe there's a point of order that's been raised, and you've ruled we have a right now to answer Mr. Nadler's.
it is not a valid point of order. The chair has
can't just
already
repress it, Mr. Chairman, because you don't.
On that ruling.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Strzok.
Mr. Chairman, I appeal the ruling of the chair that you have just made on that on whether the
you have not stated a valid point of
and
order.
That is your ruling, and I appeal it.
That is not an appealable
point of order. Yes, it is, Mr. Chairman. Appealing the ruling of the chair is exactly what he's requesting. He's appealing it. That requires a vote to either sustain it or overrule it.
The gentleman from New York has not cited a rule of the House that is being violated. Therefore, it is not a point of order.
That's your
ruling. That ruling of the chair.
Mr. Chairman, is it not appropriate to also interject the attorney-client privilege, which cannot be overridden, and is a rule of the House to the extent that...
By the way, that is now Sheila Jackson Lee weighing in on this.
Witnesses have the right to an attorney-client privilege in this House. And that is what this witness is asserting. Attorney-client privilege, and he has been advised not to answer the question.
The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman has not...
I want you to hear, and the reason this is important, I want you to hear, this is what your DC politicians do, and how the Democrats are nothing but obstructionists. The FBI is an obstructionist agency, so is Peter Strzok and everyone there on the Democrat side. Period. End of statement.
Not raise the attorney-client privilege. He has said that he's been instructed by the FBI not to answer the question. Now,
by lawyers.
He knows the advice I have just given him. If he would like, I'll restate it. But knowing this, will you answer the committee's question as directed, or do you refuse to answer the committee's question?
Point of parliamentary inquiry,
the ruling of the chair that
point of parliamentary
order
inquiry
was not in order.
Point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from South Carolina has the time. A parliamentary inquiry is not in order during the gentleman's time. The chair is instructing the witness to answer the question, and the question to you is,
Mr. Chairman,
will you answer the committee's question as directed, or do you refuse to answer the committee's question?
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Second.
You're not recognized for that purpose.
Mr. Chairman, I think you have no choice but to recognize such a motion.
I do not have.
Do you see what lengths Democrats will do to protect the FBI at this point? This was the agency that they originally, for decades, absolutely despised. Now they're circling the wagons around the FBI.
Are you just going to make up rules as we go along?
The motion is not in order during the time controlled by the gentleman from South Carolina.
I appeal that ruling of the chair.
By the way, if you weren't aware, this is a joint hearing of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee and Judiciary Committees.
Mr. Strzok, will you
Chairman,
answer?
I appeal your ruling of the chair that my motion to adjourn is not in order.
The gentleman is not in order.
That may be, but I appeal your ruling.
The gentleman is not recognized. Knowing this, will you answer the committee's question as directed, or do you refuse to answer the committee's question?
Mr. Chairman, as you know, counsel for the FBI has directed me not to answer questions about the ongoing investigation. As you also know, counsel for the FBI is sitting here behind me. May I consult with them?
You may consult with your own counsel.
But I may not consult with the FBI's counsel?
Only with your own counsel.
Mr. Chairman, there's no basis for that. He can consult with the FBI counsel. He's an FBI employee.
The gentleman is not recognized.
And the chairman is not being proper.
The chairman is being proper.
The witness can't be directed not to confer with his attorney.
The FBI is not his attorney. His attorney is seated behind him. If he wishes
He's an
to
employee
consult
of
with
the
his attorney,
FBI,
as he's already done, he may do so.
And his attorney may consult with the FBI attorney?
Isn't the privilege that of the FBI, and shouldn't the FBI counsel
By the way, in the background, you can see Jim Jordan leaning over and talking to Trey Gowdy.
be solicited on that point?
Mr. Chairman, my counsel has reiterated that counsel for the FBI has directed that I may not answer that question.
Mr. Strzok, in a moment we will continue with the hearing, but based on your refusal to answer the question, at the conclusion of the day we will be recessing the hearing and you will be subject to recall to allow the committee to consider proceeding with a contempt citation.
A point of order, Mr. Chairman. Will the committee also consider contempt for Mr. Bannon, who refused to answer Mr. Gowdy's questions when he was actually under subpoena?
That is not a proper point of order in this hearing.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Gowdy, do you remember
Parliamentary inquiry.
Do you remember that?
By the way, that question was from Representative Swalwell from the state of California right here. Fuck you, dude.
Is controlled by the gentleman from
Parliamentary inquiry.
A parliamentary inquiry is
Mr.
not
Bannon,
in order
wouldn't answer your
when the
questions
gentleman
under subpoena,
from
Mr.
South
Gowdy.
Carolina controls the time.
Agent Strzok, just so the record's clear, because it's been a little while.
And you can see what that all accomplished. It accomplished an assload, did it not?
I didn't ask you the content of those interviews. I didn't ask you the names of who you interviewed. I asked you whether or not you interviewed anyone from July the 31st until August the 8th. And I find it interesting that the FBI will tell us no interviews were conducted before July 31st. That apparently doesn't impact an ongoing probe. But between July 31st and August 8th, it does. Here's the good news. I already know the answer to it. I went and looked at the file. The first interview that I can find is on August the 11th of 2016, which is 11 days after it began, which makes me wonder, on August the 6th.
Why is Trey Gowdy a good attorney? And the answer is this: never ask a question you don't really know the answer to already.
So you hadn't interviewed anyone. You're investigating this alleged Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. You're the lead investigator. You originated the investigation. You're the point of contact. You drafted the document. And here you are, before you've interviewed a single solitary witness, saying F Trump. Then that same day, your colleague, Lisa Page, wrote.
By the way, let me interject this right now. I got a private message from Whiskey Dale. And this is information from Katie Pavlich. Breaking news. Goodlatte says FBI's Peter Strzok will be held in contempt. And also from Katie Pavlich, after blowing off the subpoena, FBI lawyer Lisa Page will testify to Congress on Friday. That is from townhall.com. Let's continue. Thank you.
Maybe you're meant to protect the country from that menace. And you responded, I can protect the country at many levels. We're not even a week into an investigation that you originated, approved, were the contact for. You hadn't interviewed a single solitary soul until August 11th, and you're already promising to protect the country from that menace, Donald Trump. And then on August the 8th, you still hadn't interviewed anyone. You're 8 days into your Russian collusion with the Trump campaign investigation, and you got another text from your colleague, Lisa Page. Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right? And you replied, no. No, he's not. We'll stop it. By the time you promised to stop him from becoming president on August the 8th.
Is that bias? Answer that question yourself. That's not biased.
How many interviews had you conducted?
Mr. Gowdy, so two answers to that. One, with regard to how many interviews had or had not been conducted, I have been directed by counsel for the FBI not to answer that question. Second, sir, I think it's important to take those texts in the context of how they were written and what they meant.
And someone may ask you that question, Agent Strzok, but I didn't. I asked you how many people you interviewed before you wrote it.
Bing.
If you want to get into context, let one of my other colleagues do that with you. Here's what I want to know. Who's the he and he's not?
He is then candidate Trump.
So when you said no, Donald Trump's not, in connection with the question going to become president, what's the it?
Chairman
We'll
Gotti,
stop it.
Chairman Gotti, that text needs to be taken in the context of
I'm asking, look, if you want to have a debate over a two-letter word, we're going to have to do that some other time. What and who did you mean by it?
Mr. Gotti, as I've stated, that text was written late at night.
Won't answer the question. Non-responsive, Your Honor.
In shorthand.
I don't care when it was written. I don't care whether it was longhand, cursive. I don't care about any of that. I want to know what it meant, Agent Strzok.
It would be his candidacy for the presidency.
See, it wasn't that tough.
And my sense that the American
it's not that tough.
population would not vote him into office.
Right. Well, we hadn't gotten to the will yet.
Well, I'm trying to cut to the chase and explain the text.
The will is the American people. Is that right? That's your testimony. The will stop it. You were speaking on behalf of the American people. Is that correct?
Mr. Gotti, what my testimony is and what I said during extensive asking.
By the way, just to let you know, according to the marquee rules that abound here in the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, we are going to forego the bottom of the hour break and continue.
This question during my prior interview is, I don't recall writing that text.
Are you denying writing the text?
Are you kidding me? This is the number 4, the formerly number 4 member, the head of the counterintelligence, the entire counterintelligence division of the FBI, in one of the most chastened and challenged investigations that he will ever come across, and he can't remember. Hey, this is a theme.
What I can tell you is that text in no way suggested that I or the FBI would take any action to influence the candidacy of
Agent Strzok, that is a fantastic answer to a question nobody asked.
Yeah, Mr. Gotti, you asked what I meant.
My question to you is
Chairman,
the
the
wheel.
witness going to be permitted to answer the question posed? We look forward to that.
So your testimony.
His time has expired, Mr. Chairman.
Your
by
testimony
2.5 minutes.
It's going to be tough for me to get through it if I keep getting interrupted. Your testimony a couple of weeks ago was the we meant the American people, which I found confusing because on November the 7th, which is the day before the election, you said this. You were concerned that those same American people that you were speaking on behalf of might actually elect Donald Trump president. So you said, OMG, this is effing terrifying. I think we know what effing means. I'm pretty sure we have OMG down too. What was terrifying about those same American people you trusted to stop him in August, not stopping him in November? What was so terrifying about that, Agent Strzok?
Mr. Gotti, I do not have a copy of the transcript. We have not been provided that transcript.
It's your text. It's not the transcript. It's your text.
Mr. Gotti, what I would say in that is, one, I was not referring to the American electorate at all. The American electorate,
Of course not. This, you are finding, is a trend of lie after lie.
Respect in their
What would happen if you and I lied like this in front of Congress?
decisions and their right to vote is absolutely a cornerstone of our democracy. So at no time did I insult or call into question the judgment or the power of the American electorate.
Right.
What I was expressing in that text is my personal belief and my personal sense of how I saw and what I believed in the potential upcoming administration.
And see, that's what I find so confounding, because in August you blamed the we on the American people, that the American people would stop it, because you don't want it to be you and Lisa
Mr.
Page,
Chairman,
and you don't want it to be the FBI.
Are we not given 5 minutes to answer questions? We have indulged this harassment 9 minutes.
The chair asking questions now, according to Democrats, of course, is harassment. Asking, just like I said at the very beginning, these people have the temerity to put Peter Strzok in a chair and ask him questions.
The Judiciary and the Oversight Committee, I thought
the gentlewoman will suspend. The chair, in agreement with The ranking members of both committees agreed that there would be liberality in the questioning by the chairman and the ranking members of each committee. The gentleman will continue.
What I find
And
confounding,
Mr. Chairman,
Agent
we
Strzok,
expect that liberality on every one of our questionings.
what I find confounding, Agent Strzok, is you were counting on the American people. That was the we you referenced in August when you said, we'll stop it. But the American people didn't stop it. He actually won. So then we go to March of 2017, and you're already talking longingly about him resigning. And then we go to the day that Special Counsel Mueller, well, before we go to that, that's March of 2017. March of 2016, you wrote, God, Hillary should win 100 million to 0. And I'm assuming Hillary would be former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton?
That's correct.
All right.
You see how Trey Gowdy is pointing out both ends, the support of Hillary and the extreme bias against Donald John Trump.
In March of 2016, weren't you investigating her for potential mishandling of classified information?
We were.
Had you interviewed her yet?
No.
Had you interviewed more than 30 other witnesses that wound up being interviewed?
I would have to check the case file, but I'll take your representation. That's
well, if she had said something incriminating in your interview that took place months later of her, would she have won 100 million to 0 then?
Likely not, no.
Well, then why wouldn't you wait until the investigation was over before?
Wait, I know.
Or you have her the nominee and winning a general election against an opponent that hadn't even been named yet. 100 million to 0, Agent Strzok? That's how bad she should win?
Mr. Gowdy, those personal expressions of my observing the political process of the presidential primaries had no bearing on my actions of any investigation, to include the investigation of Secretary Clinton.
You couldn't think...
Right. And do you believe him?
Or anybody else. Sir,
you couldn't think of a single person that would not vote for Hillary Clinton for president? 100 million to 0, Agent Strzok?
So that was clearly hyperbole, which I...
Well, let's say it was hyperbole. Let's divide it by 10. How about we say it was hyperbolic and divide it by 10? 100 million divided by 10, I'm pretty sure is 10 million. 0 divided...
Peter Strzok is smiling now because this is so amusing.
Divided by 10 is still 0. You couldn't think of a single solitary person that was going to vote for her for president before you interviewed her and while you were supposed to be investigating her.
Congressman, clearly that's not the truth. Clearly I could envision millions of Americans who are likely and did vote for then candidate.
Well, you wrote it.
My point, sir.
Did you write it? Did you write that?
I did write that, sir.
Okay. Were you under duress?
Political expression engaging in hyperbole.
Were you under duress?
Asked and answered over and over again.
The gentlewoman will suspend. The gentleman from South Carolina controls the time.
All right, we're going to go into one other time period. May 17th, 2017, Bob Mueller is appointed. Your friend Jim Comey's been fired. He's already leaked the memos to his law professor friend, and Mueller is special counsel. Do you remember how long it took for you to start talking about impeachment after Bob Mueller was appointed?
I don't, sir.
1 day. 1 day. And you were talking about impeachment. And for anyone who may have missed it the day after his appointment, Agent Strzok, you did it again 5 days later. Now, how many interviews had you done as part of the special counsel team within the first 5 days of his appointment?
Sir, again, same answer as before. I can't get into details.
Right, and the answer is also the same. It's 0. No interviews had been done.
I don't know if that's true or not.
No interviews had been done by August the 8th when you're talking about stopping him and how terrifying it would be for him to win and how you can protect the country. And no interviews had been done before you're talking about impeachment of the president.
See, apparently Peter Strzok seems to think that Trey Gowdy and the rest of the people there that are questioning him are such dunderheads that they don't know the answers to these questions before they even sat down.
But no wonder Bob Mueller kicked you off of the investigation, Agent Strzok. My question is, if you were kicked off when you read the text, shouldn't you have been kicked off when you wrote them?
Not at all.
Well, it wasn't the discovery of your text, Mr. Strzok. It was the existence of your bias that got you kicked off.
No, Mr. Gowdy, it wasn't. I do not have bias. My personal opinions in no way.
Well, then why did you get kicked off? Why did you get kicked off?
Mr. Gowdy, my understanding of why I was kicked off was that based on an understanding of those texts and the perception that they might create,
well, hang on a second, Agent Strzok.
Wait. You dipshit. Perception is bias. Bias is perception. They're one and the same. And I want you to see how abjectly craven this empty suit is.
Hang on a second. Perception. Integrity. You're saying it was the perception. There are 13 Democrats on the special counsel probe, including one who went to what he hoped was a victory party. That's a perception problem, too. They weren't kicked off. You were. Why were you kicked off?
Mr. Gowdy, I cannot speak to Special Counsel Mueller's
How long did you talk to him?
The reasons why he did or didn't.
How long did you talk to him when he let you go?
Witness answer the question.
Witness will be afforded the opportunity.
My recollection, it was a short meeting, somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes, probably around 15 minutes.
And your testimony is Bob Mueller did not kick you off because of the content of your text. He kicked you off because of some appearance that he was worried about.
My testimony, what you asked and what I responded to, was that he kicked me off because of my bias. I'm stating to you it is not my understanding that he kicked me off because of any bias, that it was done based on the appearance. If you want to represent what you said accurately, I'm happy to answer that question, but I don't appreciate what was originally said being changed.
I don't give a damn what you appreciate, Agent Strzok. I don't appreciate having it.
Thank you. Can you believe this?
An FBI agent with an unprecedented level of animus working on 2 major investigations during 2016.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings.
Point of order,
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to
answer the questions that you promised him he would have an opportunity to answer? We endured 15 minutes of badgering of the witness. Can he be allowed now?
Badgering of the witness again consists of asking questions. What you didn't see is Strzok's attorney from the rear came up and handed him now a yellow piece of paper.
To answer as you promised, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman will suspend. The witness at any time can ask for additional time to respond to any member's question if the time has been
you
ended.
Said you were going to give him that opportunity at the end.
I am giving him that opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to?
Yes, you may.
Yes, Mr. Gowdy. Sir, I think it's important when you look at those texts that you understand the context in which they were made and the things that were going on across America. In terms of the text that we will stop it, you need to understand that that was written late at night, off the cuff, and it was in response to a series of events that included then
Okay, so he was drunk texting, apparently.
Candidate Trump insulting.
That's what the number 4 guy should be. And because, just remember, it's never his problem. It's never his fault. It's always everyone else's. By the way, in this case, it's Donald Trump's fault.
Immigrant family of a fallen war hero. And my presumption, based on that...
Told you, it's President Trump's fault. It's Trump's fault. I shit you not, this is what occurred. This is why you have to hear this.
Horrible, disgusting behavior that the American population would not elect somebody demonstrating that behavior to be President of the United States. It was in no way, unequivocally, any suggestion that me, the FBI, would take any action whatsoever to improperly impact the electoral process for any candidate. So I take...
When in doubt, when under question, always attack, 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 attack. And that's what Peter Strzok has just been told to do on that yellow piece of paper.
Great offense, and I take great disagreement to your assertion of what that was or wasn't. As to the 100 million to 1, that was clearly a statement made in jest and using hyperbole.
Right, this is never biased. It's all about jest. That's so funny. Right? Yeah.
That is absolutely their right. That is what makes our democracy such a vibrant process that it is. But to suggest somehow that we can...
So Peter Strzok deigns to lecture us about a democracy.
Parse down the words of shorthand textual conversations like there's some contract for a car is simply not consistent with my or most people's use of text messaging. I can assure you, Mr. Chairman, at no time in any of these texts did those personal beliefs ever enter into the realm of any action I took. Furthermore, this isn't just me sitting here telling you, you don't have to take my word for it. At every step, at every investigative decision. There are multiple layers of people above me, the assistant director, executive assistant director, deputy director, and director of the FBI.
Oh, right, the assistant director, the one that got fired for lying. That assistant director, Andrew McCabe.
Multiple layers of people below me, section chiefs, supervisors, unit chiefs, case agents, and analysts, all of whom were involved in
Oh, yeah, the FBI director, James Comey, who got fired. Yeah, that's good to quote.
all of these decisions. They would not tolerate any improper behavior in me any more than I would tolerate it in them. That is who we are as the FBI. And this
Right, and as a result, the number 2 guy, assistant director, Andy McCabe, gone. The number 1 director of the FBI, gone.
suggestion that I, in some dark chamber somewhere in the FBI, would somehow cast aside all of these procedures, all of these safeguards, and somehow be able to do this is astounding to me. It simply couldn't happen. And the proposition that that is going on, that it might occur anywhere
It simply couldn't happen.
in the FBI, deeply corrodes what the FBI is in American society, the effectiveness of their mission, and it is deeply destructive.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion. I have a rule.
And who do you think is clapping? Well, that's right. That would be all of the Democrats. Now let's listen to Jim Jordan talk to, in sweet, loving tones, again, to Peter Strzok.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Chairman. Agent Strzok, did you provide any information to reporters, journalists, or media personalities about anything related to Trump-Russia investigation in 2016, 17, or 18?
No.
Did the press ever talk to you, Agent Strzok, about this issue? Did they ever come to you?
The Trump-Russia collusion investigation?
Did the press ever come to you? I'm asking first, did you talk to them? I'm asking now, did they ever come to you about anything related to Trump-Russia investigation in 2016, 2017, or 2018?
I received a number of calls from various members of the media, particularly when I returned from the Office of Special Counsel. In every instance,
Prior to going on the special counsel team, did you get any inquiries from the press that you took?
Not that I took. I referred them to the Office of Public Affairs of the FBI.
Have you read the dossier?
I have.
Okay, and you wrote about it too, didn't you?
I don't know what you mean by writing about it.
We got an email that you sent. It should be presented there, or should be in front of you there. I want you to take a look at this. This is an email you wrote to Lisa Page, Bill Priestap, Jim Baker, Jim Rubicki, and CC'd Andy McCabe. Subject line is BuzzFeed's about to publish the dossier. You familiar with this email?
I am.
All right. It says this: comparing now, the set is only identical to what McCain had. Parentheses, it has differences from what was given to us by Korn and Simpson. Did you write all that?
Congressman, let me answer it this way. The first, if I could address the chairman. Over the break, I was authorized by the General Counsel.
Hang on a second. I just want my time stopped if you could. Are you addressing me or the chairman?
I'd like to address the chairman the time. This is all going to come together in an answer.
Is there a question you want to direct?
No, it's something I wanted to answer your question from earlier based on something I've been told by the FBI.
Wait.
I think I'm aware of what the FBI told you, and you and I will have another chance to talk about that. But right now, the gentleman from Ohio controls the time.
You wrote this. That was the question.
So, obviously,
wait,
you have
look at that. Do you see the from?
So Congressman, here's
do you see the from line? Do you see the from line?
Congressman, I do.
It says
I
Peter
understand.
Strzok. Then
Do you understand the incredible arrogance that's going on here? He cannot provide even a yes or a no answer.
It says to Lisa Page and a whole bunch of other key people at the FBI. So did you write it?
I did write this.
All right, let me ask you a couple questions about it. It has differences from what was given to us by Korn and Simpson. Who's Korn?
Sir, to answer that question, and I would love to answer that question, and every part of me, and you know why I'd want to answer that question, because you have this information.
Who's Simpson?
I have been, sir, if I may, I cannot answer that question.
You wrote about it. It's now public. Who's Korn? Who's Simpson?
Based on direction by the FBI, sir, I am not able to answer questions about ongoing investigative matters.
I just want to figure this out. I want to figure this out, Agent Strzok. You're referencing 3 copies of the dossier. The BuzzFeed copy you have, the one John McCain's staff gave to you, and the one that you said you got from Korn and Simpson. The one.
Did you hear that? Did you hear John McCain's staff gave the dossier over to Peter Strzok? What is that? That tells you essentially, as far as I'm concerned, all that you ever needed to know now, then, or in the future about John McCain.
McCain gave to you, and the one BuzzFeed has are identical, in your words, But they have, the Korn and Simpson one is different.
Sir,
this is kind of important.
It is important, and I want to answer your question. And here's the position that I'm in, Congressman. I have been directed. May I answer your question?
Mr. Chairman, may the witness be permitted
Mr.
to
Chairman,
answer the question?
Mr. Jordan repeatedly asked the question, doesn't let him answer it.
The gentleman from Ohio controls the time.
I have been directed that I may state that I have read the dossier, that I read the dossier as it came in parts and pieces.
You've already told me you read it.
And
I want to know who Korn and Simpson are.
And, sir, what I'm telling you is that I have been directed I may not state the various places
okay,
where
let me ask you this. I got it. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Did you ever communicate with David Korn?
No.
Did you ever communicate with Glenn Simpson?
See, again, a good attorney knows. He knew the names. The purpose was to find out whether this guy was going to be up front and to expose his obstructionist tactics here. And when you already have 50% of the name, and you understand the depth and breadth to which he will go to cover himself, Lisa Page, and the FBI, and the deep state conspiracy that's in front of our damn faces.
No. Did you ever communicate with Nellie Orr?
No.
Did you ever communicate with Bruce Orr?
Yes.
When did you communicate with Bruce Orr?
My recollection is somewhere between possibly three or 4 or 5 times in the late 2016, early 2017 timeframe.
What did you talk about?
We talked about investigative matters that Mr. Orr was involved in.
Did you talk about the investigation we're focused on here, Agent Strzok?
My direction from the FBI is that I may not answer that question, sir.
I got it. Let's go back to the email that you sent that you won't talk about. Are there 3 copies of the dossier as evidenced by what you said in this email?
Sir, to be clear, I want to talk about this email. I want nothing more than
all you want, because not talking about it, I'm not answering my questions. Are there 3 copies?
I believe it.
3 copies of what?
The McCain copy, the BuzzFeed copy, and the one that you got from Korn and Simpson.
Sir, the most I can say is we received a variety of copies of and different types of
Let me ask you one other question. Let me ask you one other question. Glenn Simpson testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee on August 22nd, 2017. He was asked, did anyone from Fusion ever communicate with the FBI? His response, no. No one from Fusion ever spoke with the FBI. So here's what I'm having trouble understanding. If Glenn Simpson says no one ever spoke with the FBI, how is it that you got a copy of the dossier from Simpson?
Thank you.
Sir, I can tell you I never had contact with Fusion, with Mr. Simpson, with Mr. Korn. And again, sir.
Chairman, regular order.
The gentleman will have a few more seconds since he was interrupted.
Well, I mean, this is the frustration that every single member of this committee feels is when Agent Strzok won't answer, well, more importantly, the American people feel when Agent Strzok won't answer fundamental questions like the guy he references in an email, Korn and Simpson, and won't tell me who they are. This is unbelievable. But that's where it's gotten to now, and it's as frustrating as it can get, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Briefly.
Sir, it is as frustrating to me as it is to you. I can tell you, sir, that I would love...
You know what, Agent Strzok?
Mr. Chairman, may the witness be permitted to answer.
If it's so...
If the gentleman will suspend...
If it's so frustrating, answer the question.
If you'll allow him to, I'm sure he will.
He has never answered the question who Korn and Simpson are.
We're about
the gentleman instruct the gentleman from Ohio to stop badgering and allow him to answer the question.
We're about to move on. The gentleman from Ohio's time's expired. And we're about to move on where Mr. Strzok can answer a question that he refused to answer earlier on advice of counsel. And I'm going to yield to Mr. Gowdy for the purpose of doing that right now.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Gowdy starts, may I respond to Mr. Jordan?
Very briefly.
Very briefly, sir. I would love to do that. There is an appropriate time for oversight, and as you well know, that is at the end of an investigation once it's concluded. I am certain Congress will absolutely have the opportunity to look at any investigation once it's closed, ask all these questions, and I would love to answer each and every one of your questions
Mr.
once
Strzok,
the FBI allows me.
we already know that answer from you, and you have
Do you believe a word that comes out of this guy's mouth ever? Ever?
already been advised that you can
And where has his mouth been?
answer the questions here, because guess what? This is the United States Congress where you're testifying, not under the jurisdiction of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Mr. Chairman, we cannot be asking about an ongoing investigation that is sabotaging an ongoing investigation by this committee, and that's what he's not cooperating with, and we should not do it.
It is
and he
not-
cannot cooperating with that.
It is, these questions are table-setting questions regarding the formation of this, and he can answer those questions, but
He cannot answer questions
he's been
regarding an
advised by
ongoing
the FBI
investigation.
that he can, and so Mr.
He's been
Gowdy's
advised by the FBI that he cannot.
No, he's been advised that he can, and Mr. Gowdy's going to again ask his question.
The gentleman from Ohio has asked for 15 seconds.
So, Agent Strzok, who's being square here? Glenn Simpson says no one from Fusion spoke with the FBI. You say in your email, we got a copy of the dossier from Simpson.
Mr.
Chairman, regular
order. We will have regular order, and we'll revisit that question. Now the chair recognizes the gentleman from...
And now you understand it's, when did you lie to me, Peter Strzok? Did you lie to me before, or did you lie to me after, and or are you lying to me now? Now we speak and listen to Louis Gohmert and Peter Strzok.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gohmert, for 5 minutes.
That would be right here.
Sir.
Mr. Strzok, you said earlier in this hearing you were concerned about a hostile foreign power affecting our election. Do you recall the intelligence community?
By the way, just to let you know up front, there will be overtime. There may be about 5 minutes overtime or so, and even if there is a little bit more, I don't really care, and I bet you don't either.
Community Inspector General Chuck McCulloch having an investigation into an anomaly found on Hillary Clinton's emails?
I do not.
Well, let me refresh your recollection. The intelligence community Inspector General Chuck McCulloch sent his investigator, Frank Rucker, along with an ICIG attorney, Jeanette McMillan, to brief you and Dean Chappelle and 2 other FBI personnel that I won't name at this time about an anomaly they had found on Hillary Clinton's emails that were going to and from the private unauthorized server that you were supposed to be investigating. Now, do you remember it?
I remember meeting Mr. Rucker on either 1 or 2 occasions. I do not remember the specific content or discussions.
Well, I'll help you with that too
meeting.
then. Mr. Rucker reported to those of you, the 4 of you there, in the presence of the ICIG attorney, that they had found this anomaly on Hillary Clinton's emails going through her private server. And when they had done the forensic analysis, they found that her emails, every single one except for 4, over 30,000 of them, were going to an address that was not on the distribution list. It was a compartmentalized bit of information that was sending it to an unauthorized source. Do you recall that?
Sir, I don't.
Well, he went on to explain it, and you didn't say anything. No. You thanked him, you shook his hand, but the problem was that it was going to an unauthorized source that was a foreign entity unrelated to Russia, and from what you've said here, you did nothing more than nod and shake the man's hand when you didn't seem to be all that concerned about our national integrity of our election when it was involving Hillary Clinton. So,
meaning that was a problem that was right in your lap, and the question is, what did you do about it?
The forensic examination was done by the ICIG, and they can document that, but you were given that information and you did nothing with it. And one of the things I found most egregious with Mr. Horowitz's testimony, and by the way, Horowitz got a call 4 times by someone wanting to brief him, leaving messages telling him about this, and he never returned the call. He had 500 pages of bias that he gave us, and then he threw a bone to the Democrats and said, but we can't find bias. And let me tell you, when you have text messages, Mr. Strzok, the way you do, saying the things you did, you'd been better off coming in here and say, look, that was my bias. And you kind of get around to that a little bit when you say, hey, you know, everybody's got political views. Those are called biases, and we all have them. And you have come in here and said, I had no bias. And you do it with a straight face. And I watched you in the private testimony you gave. And I told some of the other guys, he is really good. He's lying. He knows, we know he's lying. And he could probably pass a polygraph. It's amazing.
Mr. Chairman.
No, this is my
Mr.
time.
Chairman, I'm sorry.
It needs to be paused.
This point of order.
No.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
A member of this committee just asserted that this witness, who is under oath and a former agent of the FBI, lied. There is no evidence that I have.
Right, because FBI agents never lie. Andrew McCabe, right?
Asking to withdraw it.
I do not withdraw it. He is not a member of Congress. It's not a violation of the rule. And just as you have been expressing bias through your members about what a hero
there is not a single person on this committee who has ever characterized a witness
Gentleman
as
from
lying.
Rhode Island.
Gentlemen,
it's my time.
When you all applauded as Democrats, that is a distinct display of bias, and they don't even realize it because they don't want to.
The gentleman from Rhode Island will
Praise
suspend.
him. No, the disgrace, what this man has done.
The gentleman from Texas will suspend for a moment.
There is the disgrace. And it won't be recaptured anytime soon because of the damage you've done to the justice system. And I've talked to FBI agents around the country. You've embarrassed them. You've embarrassed yourself.
Here we go. This nails it.
And I can't help but wonder when I see you looking there with a little smirk, how many times did you look so innocent into your wife's eye and lie to her about Lisa?
Mr. Chairman, this is outrageous.
Wow, wow, here come the fireworks.
Shame on you,
Mr. Chairman, please. There's
Mr. Chairman, this is intolerable harassment of the witness.
What's wrong with that? You need your medication.
The gentleman controls the time.
Well, I ask that the witness be permitted to respond to
He will be permitted
Did you
to
ever
respond. The
talk
gentleman
to
controls
Hillary
the time.
Clinton during your investigation, besides the one questioning you mentioned, before that or after that to this day?
By the way, with regard to Peter Strzok fucking Lisa Page, I have a very salient and logical view about that at the conclusion of this program.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. The gentleman will state his point of order.
It is, I think, against the rules of the House for a member of the committee to be impugning the character of a witness.
It is not.
He should ask questions to...
This is Nadler, the Democrat, that's back behind Gomert.
Listen, the purpose of this hearing is to elicit information. He should ask questions to elicit information. He should not be impugning the character of the witness.
The gentleman is advised the rules of the House only are directed to members of the House and the President of the United States.
And that's correct. I happen to know that rule.
Therefore, in other words, it is okay to impugn the character of witnesses in any way whatsoever?
Well, listen, I've heard many members on your side of the aisle impugn character of somebody who is covered by the rules of the House. But the gentleman...
I'm sorry, Bob Goodlatte, that's a classic. That's $1 million monster classic.
The gentleman has 20 seconds left.
This is why I wanted to play this for you tonight.
The clock will be turned back on, and he can complete his time, and then the witness can respond.
So if you talk to Hillary Clinton, other than the time she was examined in front of the witnesses?
No.
So after throwing away what you have with all the bias you have, you've never even gotten a thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman may respond.
Sir, well, that's quite a set of statements.
Mr. Chairman, I did not finish with a question.
The gentleman...
There was no question asked.
Mr. Chairman, he's been given the opportunity to respond.
The gentleman will suspend. The time of the gentleman has expired, and as I've indicated
earlier... The rules of our hearings are if there is a question asked during the time, the witness may respond to the question after the time.
The witness is going to be allowed to respond briefly.
That's a new rule.
Sir, first, I assure you,
question.
under oath,
By the way, that was a Republican response to the Republican chair.
as I spoke also during my interview a week or two ago, I have always told the truth. The fact that you would accuse me otherwise, the fact that you would question whether or not that was the sort of look I would engage with in a family member who I have acknowledged hurting goes more.
Here comes the pedantic platform, and he's going to lecture us because he is so much better than we are.
To a discussion about your character and what you stand for and what is going inside you.
It's to your credibility, and you lost your credibility.
Both
You've lost your credibility.
This is a wife cheater who's trying to justify ethics to us in a public setting and slap us down. AYFKM. Are you fucking kidding me?
While I doubt it plays well
Gentleman
to
from
America,
Texas
I'm not sure
will
it plays
the
well.
gentleman from Texas will suspend. The witness has had ample opportunity to express his feelings about that, and now the chair recognizes.
Mr. Chairman, there's a discussion about the representative's first assertion about what the ICIG said that I would like to respond to.
Very briefly.
Very briefly. I have no recollection of that conversation. I can tell you I am not a computer forensic expert. I can tell you that every allegation that we had, and ICIG was a great and close partner, every allegation that we had, whether from them or anybody else, was forwarded to experts who looked at it. The scores and scores of servers and BlackBerries and emails and everything we got were combed over carefully by the FBI's experts to see if there's any indicia of injury.
But you don't recall going over those emails, correct?
Gentlemen will suspend. I have no idea what you're talking about, and frankly,
and the witness will suspend as well.
I do not know what you're talking about.
That is enough. You just can't let a witness go on forever. When the fact is, you never did anything about those, correct?
Regular order.
You didn't do anything.
And again, big smile on Peter Strzok's face. Because again, he's so much better. He's so much smarter. He's so much more intelligent and worthy than any of you other dummies in chamber.
Sir, if there was a lead, I gave it to the team. Unequivocally.
The gentleman,
there was nothing along the lines that was not addressed.
Well, that'll come out.
Mr. Gomer, you will suspend. Mr. Deutsch, I apologize. I've been instructed by the ranking member that we're going committee to committee, so the next gentleman who's going to be recognized is the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, for 5 minutes.
Okay, then we had this. This was basically the Democrat response to essentially the head planner of a soft coup against the United States of America, which is clearly, this is okay. This is cool beans. This is great stuff as far as the leftists, Democrats, and the American media maggots, the LDAM, are concerned. This is great stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Strzok, I don't know where to start. If I could give you a Purple Heart, I would. You deserve one.
This is a Democrat saying he wants to give a Purple Heart to Peter Strzok. Cue the violins.
This has been an attack on you in a way to attack Mr. Mueller and the investigation that is to get at Russia collusion involved in our election, which is what this committee should be looking at. A direct strike at democracy and what this country's about, and free and fair elections, keeping us independent of who is our foe. Not our...
This is Mr. Cohen, by the way, and I would suggest to Mr. Cohen, you know, with that, what you've just said, perhaps you should address a memo to Bobby Mueller about that as well, to Mueller, that maybe he should focus like a laser beam instead of what he isn't.
Our competitor, our foe. I just returned from the OSCE in Berlin, and there is little question among our allies and people and diplomats throughout Europe that Russia is an antagonistic country that is trying to wreak havoc in the Baltics, in the Balkans as well. They tried to use assassination to try to influence the elections in Montenegro, what they've done in Ukraine with Crimea and the Donbass, what they've done in Georgia, what they've done in Moldova. They are the bad guys. And you've dedicated most of your life to working in counterintelligence. One of your big cases, I think, was Donald Heathfield and Tracy Ann Foley. Is that correct?
Oh, now we got to prop up Peter Strzok. We have to go to his hero wall. We have to look at his hero wall and look at all the medals that Peter Strzok has. And we've got to buttress this witness up because he went out of his way to be an arrogant prick.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was how many Russian folks did you expose and bring to justice?
Well, that was a long, large investigation that tremendous number of
Thanks, Peter Strzok. You're feeding my point that I will make in just a moment.
extraordinary people worked on that. There were ultimately, I believe, 10 roughly Russian illegals that were here, but that I started out in the early days and was honored to start out, and again, that ran a decade.
And how many Russians were deported for that?
Sir, if memory serves, 10 or 11, but I'm not certain on that number.
Pretty good case that you worked on. A good job.
Case.
Did you work on Russia primarily?
Funny how he can remember things from many, many years ago, but he just can't remember anything more recently. Does this guy have Alzheimer's? Maybe he needs a medical intervention.
Early when you were at the FBI in that area?
At that period, early on, yes.
Are there some things you can tell us about the Russians that maybe we should know before the president meets with Mr. Putin, his very good friend?
Right. We need even more softballs thrown at this guy. Hey, anybody have any Nerf softballs that we can throw along with Mr. Cohen here? Because he's doing a great job. We need more and bigger Nerf softballs thrown.
And a man he cannot say anything bad about?
Sir, I can speak to my experience as a national security professional in the FBI. The Russians are a top-rate
professional
adversary in terms of their foreign intelligence service, in terms of how competently they are able to use their intelligence service to achieve their foreign policy and national security goals, many of which you referenced, their desire, the threat from NATO trying to undermine the Western alliance.
Isn't it weird how he can string a sentence together now, but he had such a difficult time doing it earlier with Mr. Gomert and Mr. Jordan, Mr. Gowdy. Funny how that works out.
Trying to minimize the role and influence and leadership of the United States around the world, attempting to minimize and undermine the extraordinary greatness of our democracy, to make it seem pedestrian and
it's extraordinary and only great when people that you want to get into office actually do get into office, though you don't know anything about that, do you?
And on par with their kleptocracy and near dictatorship that they have to somehow make us seem less.
Right. Okay, there we go. That's great. Don't you feel better? I know I do. And that's why I wanted to play all of this for you tonight. It's more kabuki theater. And if you're expecting something big and nasty like an anvil or a piano to fall from the third floor right onto Peter Strzok's head, I don't really think that it's going to be occurring anytime recent. This is the final point that I'd like to make. You see, because at one time, FBI agent Peter Strzok was the actual head of counterintelligence for the entire FBI. And despite that, and despite having the requisite training, education, and experience, I almost said inexperience, in being a counterintelligent agent, and maybe that's counterintelligent in and of itself, and despite all of that, he compromised himself to outside actors for having an affair with Lisa Page as a married man. That's called a honeypot. And how well does he know that she herself is not connected in any way, shape, or form to Russians? Because I'm sure in post-coital stress, as they're smoking a cigarette and they're having pillow talk with each other, that's when the Russians and the Chinese agents, etc., by the way, get more information from you. So having an affair with Lisa Page as a married man, that puts you in jeopardy. But you apparently forgot that. And number two, providing a surfeit of material in way of those texts that compromises you and your agency and the United States to outside actors in a continuing series of seemingly never-ending texts. And I should also point out, if I might, the obvious as well. That was all done on official FBI and hence taxpayer-funded and purchased equipment on FBI time. I'm sure a fraction of it might be on off-duty time, but as an FBI agent, by the way, you're already accredited on a certain amount of overtime that you're paid for up front as an FBI agent, a former FBI, worked for the FBI. I happen to know that as well. Let us also, I'd like to throw this into the mix. Let us also remember that Inspector General Horowitz wrote about Peter Strzok that he had this is a quote, a clear, biased mindset. Let us also remember that Special Counsel Robert Mueller removed Peter Strzok from his team. Why would that be? And this is quite sadly all you need to know about the FBI, as Strzok is still employed, and all you need to know about the kind of an individual who partakes mightily in a soft coup against a presidential candidate, a president-elect, and a sitting president. These are the best illustrations that I can provide for you in an audio fashion tonight. In my opinion, these are responses of a sociopath. FBI agent Peter Strzok is proud. The pride speaks loudly in him. He's proud of having spearheaded a soft coup against President Trump while beforehand minimizing and doing his level best to cover up the actions of then presidential candidate Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Monsieur has been locked!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct on the SHR Media Network from the sumptuous and palatial SHR Media Studios. If you want to contact me, you can find me on Twitter at BZEP, at BZEP, my blog at bloviatingzeppelin.net. Promotional consideration is, of course, as per normal, by Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and the Boeing Company. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. Also by Pratt and Whitney Engines Thrust, that you can trust. My tiaras are by My Little Pony. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, with whom I will be consorting in less than an hour. Thanks to Ralph BENKO for a beautiful and wonderful first hour. And thank you for listening live. Thank you for being in chat. Thank you for listening in podcast. God bless. Take care. Have a great weekend. Be safe. See you next Tuesday. TTFN.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Good night, Jim Bob. Go to sleep.
Good night, and good luck.